Once more, we have a look at what's going on in Conservative Home because, as I have said every single time we cover Conservative Home, this is the place where you get to see a sort of inner view of the Tory party by people who are inside the Tory party. So, what they put in these blogs is sort of fascinating from an outsider looking in perspective into what's going on in the party. And I've always said it is fascinating to look at what these guys are saying and to just to challenge them on what they're saying as well, because they do get pushback in the comments. I will say that, but mostly it's by other Tories vehemently disagreeing with what this particular Tory is saying. It can be quite funny in the comments sometimes, but we're not going to be talking about that today. Because, of course, it is conference season coming up. And Rishi Sunak has already come out and said that he is going to ask departments about their net zero plans, whether they can, first of all, afford them, whether they should completely stop them in some cases, or can you water them down? And this is not going to play well. Partly because, once again, this shows why Rishi Sunak is trying to please everyone. And by trying to please everyone, he will please no one. As we've said multiple times before, and as we will point out in this video, the Tory party is so fractured ideologically, politically, policy-wise. Just on net zero itself, there are different factions within different factions, and we're going to be talking about the 4 factions that are pushing already against Rishi Sunak to try and get their version of the net zero policies that they want. So once again, this just goes to show you how weak a Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is, that he can't even go, I want to do this policy, let's go with it, because, oh no, sections of the Tory party will rebel. And he can't even go have any authority or anything like that to tell them to get in line or anything like that, because he's just so weak a Prime Minister. He seems so weak to actual confrontation. But before we go diving into the rest of these and these different factions and what they want, and well, ultimately what the big reason for this really is let's go. First of all, I would ask you to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, what's going on here? Well, as we said, Sunak is ordering a big review. And admittedly, this is probably Sunak's big net zero gamble. Because ultimately, who is he trying to appease and who does he want to try and get? He's got to eventually get voters on side. And the thing is, if you look at polls, if you look at the fact that we did the video just a couple of days ago about Tom Tugendhat with the fact that under 40s really, really want good net zero policies and saying, hey, as Tories, we should probably be, investing in those things. Well, as I said before, it's too little too late. You've had 13 years in power. You haven't really followed through on those. But at the end of the day, that's ultimately what this is really being done. It is a massively cynical ploy to try and get voters on board. But what's going to end up happening ultimately, as I will probably predict, will be a very, very bad, poorly watered down net zero policies, which at the end of the day, when you look at them, will be meh. Because even then, when they try to pass it, you're going to have these different factions, which we'll get to in a moment, are going to be arguing. And ultimately, what gets passed will not be what Rishi Sunak gets put forward. And here's why. Ultimately, the Tory party is so split on this, they have split into 4 distinct groups on this. The first of all, you actually have the Green Tories, the pro-net zero Tories, who can actually see, hey, look, we need to do net zero. There's a lot of good possibilities in this, investment possibilities in this. We can build new green industries on this. Look at what happening in America, look what's happening in Europe and the other European countries. They're already stealing a march on us. And currently, we have done nothing. So we are behind already. So we need to really invest into net zero, get these green energy industries and infrastructure set up so that we can benefit from this. And that's the Green Tories. And you may remember them from when we had the leadership contest just last year, where it was Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss. And they were both saying that, yes, we're going to abandon our net zero policies. And they were coming out going, well, guys, you can't do that. What are you doing? So that's the first group. Ultimately, very, very pro net zero. Your second group, again, pro net zero, but these are sort of the David Cameron era types who are like, well, we want net zero, but we want there to be a good business case for it. And ultimately, this has been very much sort of the prevailing view of most of the net zero Tory policy. And this is why, if you look at local councillors or local councils, there will be a net zero advisory group for businesses, probably in your local council somewhere, that goes out to businesses and says, "Oh, if you want to do net zero, excellent. We'll write a report. We'll help you. We'll aid you in your net zero transition. We'll give you the good business case for it." So they're not against net zero. They just want there to be a good business case for going into net zero, and they want there to be money for companies to be able to transition into net zero. So that is, again, a very clear transition. They are not let's all go gung-ho into net zero. They want that business case to be there. So that's your second group. Your third group, these are essentially the NIMBYs. They are anti-net zero, and we do not want wind farms in our constituents. We don't want any of this stuff. We are upset that our constituents are going to have to buy expensive new cars, etc., etc. They are using the excuse that, oh, this is going to damage our constituents. This was primarily the group that really fed on the ULEZ stuff during the Uxbridge by-election stuff. They are very, very much anti-net zero. Like I say, this is, from this point on, the next group even going to be more anti-net zero. But that's where they are. That's where they sit. And mostly, if you look at most Tories, even in this article, they will flip from between those two, saying, "Oh, well, we want net zero, but there has to be a good business case for it." And then they will quickly switch to the other group and go, "Oh, but actually my constituents are going to suffer because of net zero." And then they'll switch back and forth depending on, well, where the political winds happen to be blowing at the time. And then, of course, you get the final group who are completely and absolutely anti-net zero. This is where the net zero scrutiny group sits. And of course, most recently, we covered Liz Truss saying that the government needs to completely abandon all its net zero pledges and investments that it is doing, because it's not going to work. Why? Because they are fully invested in the idea of, look, climate change is happening. We accept that, but not man-made climate change. We have nothing to do with helping this at all. There's no such thing as man-made climate change. Climate change, yes, but not man-made climate change. And that's where this final group really sits. And ultimately, that's what this article discusses. The fact that you have this ongoing policy discussion, this completely four-way battle to decide what we want. And Sunak trying to appease all these groups. When you've got one group that sits on one end saying, we really want net zero, we really want to go all onto it. And then the other group at the opposite end saying, nah, we don't want to go anywhere near net zero whatsoever. We want to spend zero money on it. And then, of course, you've got the two groups in between, which the Tories will dart about very, whatever, shall we say, is politically convenient for them at the time. And Sunak is not going to be able to please all these people. He is not going to be able to please all of them at all. And the end of the article, I think it's, is it, you get Paul Goldman, regular, who's sort of the editor for this. He gets it right, that this is all what he wants. He wants this all for voters. And it is all a very conservative, a very, as he says here, a very, very, cynical ploy to try and win over voters, to try and play the play what he did with the Windsor Framework, try to please everyone, or at least please as most people as he can, and hope for some sort of win. This is a massive gamble for Rishi Sunak, especially going into a conference season, which we've already said he has to put on the biggest performance of his life. But when it comes to net zero, this is something that most Tories are very, very willing to go into the trenches for and not be moved. So for Sunak to try and please everyone, meaning he will please no one, meaning that the policies he will put out will be incredibly watered down. It will not please anyone from these factions. And ultimately, trying to pass this policy will be, if not impossible, for him to actually do. And of course, what's going to be the public reaction to it? Well, the public reaction is going to be those are incredibly weak net zero policies. Why are we going to vote for you? Especially when we are seeing this rise up the ranks of what people want to vote for. And remember, you already had an article in here in Conservative Forum from Australian conservatives saying because we engaged in climate denialism and denied any sort of green infrastructure, we were punished severely at our elections, and that's why we lost. So I'm writing to you, British conservatives, to warn you not to follow in our same footsteps. Are they listening to that warning? Absolutely not. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, this is just another fight gearing up to happen in the Tory party over net zero. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.